All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the second of our Graphic Design for Libraries webinar series. This is Intro to GIMP. My name is Courtney Allison, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and question moderator for today. Our presenter this morning is Matthew Stephenson from Pendleton Community Public Library. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This is the second webinar in this three-part series. To register for other webinars available for this theme or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways we try to stay connected to library staff in the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Collection, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. Matthew and I will both be watching that box, and we'll get your question answered as soon as there's a good opportunity. And there should also be time near the end for questions. This session is 1 hour, so you'll get one TLEU for today. At the end of the presentation, I'll put a link on the screen for you to download your LEU, so please stay signed in until the end of the presentation so you can download your LEU. I'll also put a link in the chat box to a survey about the presentation. Please take the survey and let us know how we're doing. If at any point during the webinar you experience any sound issues, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there's a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat pod. If you are unable to resolve the sound issues you're experiencing, we are recording this webinar and you can watch it after it is ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. So now I'm going to turn it over to Matthew.
Good morning, everyone. Last week I was really excited. I had 3 cups of coffee. I had 3 cups of coffee this morning, so hopefully I'm just as excited about GIMP as I was about elements of design last week. Luckily for you guys, if there's anything you missed with this, I will put up my contact info at the end of this. You can always contact me because I know this has got a very steep learning curve. I've been working with GIMP now for about 5 years, and I would by no stretch of the imagination call myself an expert on it. I'm completely self-taught when it comes to graphic design, but this is the most powerful tool I have at the library. Now, I have Photoshop here at home because I'm doing this from home. But GIMP is what I use for graphic design at the library. So GIMP, real quick, if you are not aware of what that is and you've signed up for this and you haven't looked it up, GIMP is a open source image manipulation program. You can find it at gimp.org. I hope everybody can see my screen. So gimp.org is the website that you can find us. When you go to download, it gives you a couple of options. You can download via BitTorrent. You can also download directly from them. If you're downloading this at the library, I would obviously suggest doing this directly. But if you're doing it from home, I mean, BitTorrent is an option, but I wouldn't suggest it. Now, GIMP has been around for a very long time. They have been on version 2 now for close to, I want to say 7 years now. I have never worked with GIMP before version 2, but they are getting dangerously close to 3. And I don't know what this is going to look like a year from now. It could be completely different. But I do want to let you guys know that 3 might be coming down the pike here soon, and when that does come, maybe what I'm telling you might be all for naught. So do want to let you know of that. So But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't go and download previous versions. You can. When you go to download, there is options to go and find previous versions somewhere in their website. So, but once again, just to let you know. So when you open GIMP for the first time, it's going to feel like it takes forever. And the reason is because, and obviously it came up very quickly for me, GIMP does not have access to fonts like Windows programs do. So anything in the Office suite can just access those fonts very quickly. The fonts have to be preloaded into like the GIMP database. So when you first load up GIMP, it is going to take several minutes. Okay, don't despair. Don't worry. That is completely normal. It's also completely normal for it to take a very long time to load after you install any fonts. So if you were here last week and you listened to my going on about fonts and how much I love fonts, when I install a font family or a set of fonts that I like, I usually go about once a month and kind of look through fonts and try to find something I don't have. Immediately the next time I load GIMP after installing those fonts, it takes minutes. So that's completely normal. So just be aware that you might feel like it's like locking on you, but it's not. When you first load up GIMP, you will probably be in this mode here, which is this replicates what Photoshop looks like. You have multiple windows and you can have multiple toolboxes open. I like the single window mode, which that's usually the first thing I do is I go to Windows and then I use single window mode. That's just so that I can keep it on one screen. I don't have, because both in my work and my office at work and also here at home, I have two screens. So when I go into multiple, if I have it in not single window mode, I've got things all on both screens and I don't like it. So this keeps it in one screen. It makes it very compact and easy to use. Now, when you first start with GIMP, you have to create a new document or a new picture. When you come to create a new image, it seems a little, you have templates here. I've created a template here for 4K because I make a lot of things in 4K now, just as big as I possibly can, because as I said last week, you want to make your images and your materials as big as possible, and then shrink them down because you can take things that are big, make them small, but you can't take things that are small and make them big. It's not going to look right. Now they give you a lot of options, and you'll know if you know your paper sizes here. They have the A3, A4, A5 that nobody here in America uses. That's not a paper expert, I think. They do have some common resolutions here that you will see. So 1024 by 768 is a common photo frame size. It's also a common size for like an old monitor. 16 by 12 is a not so common size. 1600 by 900 is a common size, but 1600 by 1200 is kind of a weird size. But they do have here U.S. letter and U.S. legal, but they also have CD covers. So if you have to make replacement CD covers, this is an option for you. Real quick, I'm going to create U.S. letter, and you'll notice that this automatically switches to inches. So here you have a lot of options in how you can work with what sizes. The standard is pixels rather than any size with to deal with like measurement as far as inches, millimeters, centimeters, that kind of thing. Because pixels typically, it's an electronic format. However, when you choose that, even if you choose like letter size, it still is everything's gonna come up in inches when you try to make something. So down here, you have to change your standard size to pixels. I use pixels when we kind of show you how to use Publisher in conjunction with this. That's when you can still use inches if you want. There's a question about Apple compatibility. This does work on Apple the last time I checked. So yes, Apple should be compatible, but I will take a check, or I will check for you. Now, just like with Publisher or any other image editor or Word even, you can change your image. You can transform it. So this is your old style. Before we had the Office ribbon, we used to have file edit format, it's that kind of thing. Here we have, so under image, you can go to transform. And if you need this, if you need this landscape, you would go rotate clockwise, and it's going to make it landscape. Okay. So I'm going to work with landscape real quick. And so, because I typically make my flyers and things in landscape, and I'm making a flyer today, just to kind of show you. The first things first, you have to, when you compile an image into GIMP, you are working with layers. And layers are images on top of images on top of images. And with those images we want transparency. Now, transparency is built into formats, the file format PNG, which is a photo format. It is not in a JPEG. Okay, so I highly suggest that whenever you find your source materials, that you try to find them in a PNG format. And that the reason is because there's already transparency built into it. It's a lot easier to remove aspects of the photo. But you can work with JPEGs, but it's a little bit more work, which I'm going to show you here in a second. So to insert a image into our project here, we have to go to File and then Open as Layers. That's going to bring up a dialog window, basically, for just normal open source or open file kind of thing. And I've got a few things here I was going to show you. First things first, I got this picture. I'm thinking about doing a program or a program at the library about conflict resolution with teens. So I found this photo of Superman and Superboy kind of staring down Batman and Robin. Because, real quick, side note, if you didn't know, Robin is now Batman's son. So this is, father and sons kind of facing off. Now, if I turn off this background, now you can turn off the layers and not look at the layers with this eyeball over here in this toolbar. So I can turn off the background and turn it back on. This is how you work with things, and if you have trouble looking at multiple things, you can turn them off. That doesn't necessarily mean they go away. They're just not visible right now. You change your layout when you go up the image and then go to transform. You can rotate your image however you want. So that's how you do that. Okay. So we have this white background. My goal here is to, and sorry if my dogs are being restless, so you might hear barking if somebody comes up to the door. So there's this white background, which is going to be a problem. So we need to get rid of this white background. And so you can highlight. There's some tools over here that, in this toolbar that we're going to use. So this right here is select by color. The reason we don't want to use this is it's going to select all the white. So if I close in here on Robin's eye, you'll see that it's also highlighted his eye. Well, I don't want to remove the color of his eye. I want it to stay white. Same thing with Batman's eye. The tool right next to it, it's like a magic wand. It's the fuzzy select tool. What this allows us to do is select an area that is contiguous, that is of a same color or similar color. And so when I use this tool, do you see how now I clicked up here in this space up here, and you see how Robin's eye is no longer selected? That's what we're looking for here. But as you can see here, if you look really close, you can see that there are darker spots that did not get selected. Okay. There is something here inside each tool. There is a tool option toolbar that changes whichever tool that you have. So if I choose the paint bucket, you see how the tool options change. That's because these options are just for the paint bucket. They do not apply to the magic wand or the fuzzy select tool. Okay. These options here are just for this tool alone. Okay. If we make changes to this tool, we can always reset it by clicking this button down here. This will reset any of these options. So if you make a change to your options, don't worry, you can always reset it if you mess up. Okay, or if you go back and you're like, oh, I wish I didn't. What was the default setting? This button down here will change the default option, or it'll change all of your options, not all of your options, whatever option you have selected back to the default. Okay, so here we have a threshold of 15, which means it's looking for certain colors that meet a criteria, and if it's not past a certain threshold, or if the colors are past a certain threshold, they do not get selected. That's why Batman's cowl does not get selected versus this white. Okay, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that all of the lightish gray around the cow and all that get selected. Okay, this just when you look at the finer qualities of the photo, and if you really pay attention to those things, it does come out showing in the end result. I think your patrons will appreciate it when they look at things. So here I'm going to increase this threshold to about. I was testing it earlier. It's like 102. And how did I get the tools pinned to the left? The tools are pinned when you go into single window mode. So when you go up to Windows and then go to single window mode, it's going to put all of your toolbars into one single window. Okay. And then you can move your toolbars around. So like here are the tool options. I can bring the tool options around and I can put them anywhere I want. I've chosen to have them over here on the left-hand side. So it might not necessarily be the same on your setup as it is on mine. You'll just have to kind of play around with however comfortable you feel. So I increased the threshold to about 102. And when I use the fuzzy select tool, you can see that these darker spots are now selected, but the dark part of the cow here does not select it. So when I go to delete out this white space, it's going to delete out the white space. It's going to leave all the color. That's what I want. Okay. But first, because JPEGs do not have transparency, so when I go to try to delete this, I'm like hitting the delete key repeatedly. You notice that it's not doing anything. The reason is because the base color for JPEGs is white. Like when you delete out anything, it's going to be white. When you delete things out when it's a PNG, it's going to be transparent. And transparent is signified with this checkerboard. Okay. So if I were to print this out right now, it would be Batman, Superman, Superboy, Robin inside a big white space, because anything that's transparent is going to be white when you print it on a page, because the page is white, because there's just no information there to print. What we're doing in here is we want to get rid of this white space. We have to give it a layer of transparency. So you do that because we're working with this layer alone, not the image itself, but the layer, because the layer is the PNG or is the JPEG file. We have to go to layer, then to transparency, and we're going to add this alpha channel. Alpha channel is transparency. Okay. As soon as I click that, now when I hit delete, that goes away. Okay. We've added the ability to have transparency on this layer. And by taking the extra time, do you see how there's, let me deselect it so you can see, there's a little bit of white around the cow. It's not so noticeable when you pull back out. But if you are doing like a very large image, you might want to take the time and try to get your threshold completely correct, because the better you can cut out this image, the cleaner it's going to look. Okay. Any questions so far? I'm sure there's a million questions, but that's why we're recording this. You can always go back and kind of see how I did something again. Oh God, there's multiple people typing. Looks good so far. Okay. All right. So now we need a background image. So I have found a background. Yeah, layers do retain their image format. So if I put another PNG file or another JPEG file into this, I need to give it transparency. Okay. I am going to import another layer. So I go open as layers. And I found a open source or a Creative Commons copyleft image. Let me see if I can find it. It's a gigantic image. So this image is huge. So obviously it's gigantic. This is also a JPEG, but I'm not going to need transparency for this, so I'm not going to worry about it. So you see how this is also a JPEG. I would also have to add alpha channel to this layer as well. First things first, I want to resize this layer so that I can see the whole layer, or the whole image. So when I go to layer, because I'm not changing the project, I'm changing just the layer itself. So I go to layer, layer, scale layer, and you'll see that this layer is 20,000, almost 20,000 pixels across, which is about 65 inches across. I'm not going to use all those. I'm just trying to get, I'm just trying to fit it as best I can. So up here, you can see how the dimensions of our project. Our project is 3,300 by 2,550. So the height is the maximum height we're going to ever be able to see is 2,550. When I go to change it, it's already changed the width in accordance to whatever height I've set. Because this keeps the aspect ratio, this chain link. If I were to unclick that, I could independently change the width and the height. But when this is connected, it's going to keep the aspect ratio together. Okay. So if I change this to 4,000, it's going to change that number, that top number as well. But I just need 2,550. It's going to change the width as well. And when I go to scale, it's going to take a little bit of time to scale because it's such a large image. But now we can see the whole image from as far as the top to bottom. We can't see all the way left to right. So if I scale out, you'll see how wide that image really is. That's okay. I don't need the whole image. Now, when I go to move this image around, I want to make sure I can keep it from top to bottom, and I don't have like a white space at the top or at the bottom. So I need to create what's called a guide to kind of keep me on track here. So if I go up here to the image tool, or the image bar, up here at the top toolbar, go image and then guides, I can create what's called a guide, and it will keep everything on track. So I need a new guide by %. That's the easiest way to kind of keep things on track here. If I just make one at 0%, that's going to be all the way at the top. So you see this blue line that is now all the way across the project. When I move my image, it's going to keep it, I can like lock it to that, and now I don't have to worry about it going up and down. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, that's great and all, but what happened to Batman and Superman? Well, they're below this image. So if I click, hold, and drag this layer down, that layer goes behind Batman and Superman, and now they're on the top layer. Okay. All right. So, same thing. I kind of want them at the bottom. So I need to create another guide. And this time I need a horizontal guide at 100%. That's going to put a guide all the way at the bottom. So now when I click, hold, and drag them around, I can lock them to the bottom wherever I am. I kind of want them off-centered a little bit. All right. So one thing I want to kind of do is I don't want them just there. It's kind of like the colors don't really work very well, and I want to emphasize certain things about them. And one thing you can emphasize is their logos, okay? Or in the case of Robin, you can do his logo and his mask because his mask is cool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the image black and white, but their logos I want to keep color. And this is how we do that. It's not hard. It just, if you don't know, if you were to just be like, this is not something you could replicate in Publisher, you would have to do something like this in either Photoshop or GIMP. Okay, so what we're going to do, once we have them in the location that we want, what we're going to do is, I'm going to kind of drag this across so you can see it a little bit better. Is this layer here, we're going to duplicate. How you duplicate a layer is you right click, and then you're going to click duplicate layer. Now we have two of these. They're independent of each other, okay? All right. This top layer, we are going to make black and white. How we do that is have the top layer selected, and the top layer will be the same name of whatever file it is, and then at the end it'll say copy, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to click colors, and then we're going to do desaturate. Now, if you know much about color, there's a lot of ways you can desaturate or make something black and white. So here, it's going to remove colors based on lightness. There's also luminosity. And you can see the difference just between lightness and luminosity. The average will kind of split it half and half. I personally like the way luminosity looks because lightness kind of feels like an old television set for some reason, whereas luminosity looks like something that's been printed in black and white on purpose. So that's what we're going to choose. When I click OK, that layer is now black and white. The layer that's underneath is color. That's what we want. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we're going to create what's called a layer mask. A layer mask, what that allows us to do is essentially paint over top a layer, and it's going to allow us to pull the color or pull whatever underneath it out over top of it. Okay. So here we're going to right click the black and white layer, and we're going to click add layer mask. There's a lot of options. 95% of the time you want this top option. Okay. Now you see there's two different elements to this layer. Okay. You can pick them independently of each other. Okay. So here, if I were to start editing this layer or this part of the layer, it's going to edit the black and white. Whereas when I start editing this, it's going to edit the layer mask. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take my pencil tool, and I want, so here you can change your brush here. So when you think about pencils, you don't think about brushes. Pencil is just a way of saying you want a hard edge versus the paintbrush, which is not a hard edge. It has a little bit of give to it. The pencil, and we want this dark circle here. So brushes, you can download brushes. So if you've ever been on DeviantArt, which you might actually get blocked if you're at some libraries, they might have blocked DeviantArt. DeviantArt has a lot of things you can download for GIMP, including brushes. So you can download different kinds of paint brushes. And you can always use this plus and minus sign if you need to see a bigger photo of what the brush looks like. For some reason, there's a green pepper. Don't know why, but there is. But we want this just plain circle. I didn't want any sort of blur to this. Now, when I go to paint this layer mask, you'll notice that the color pops out. Okay. And so this could be a very lengthy process of, going around trying to paint exactly in the lines. The easiest way is so you have a lot of select tools. We used the fuzzy select tool earlier. This is the free select tool. This allows us to kind of trace something and select it. So what I'm going to do here is just simply go along. You don't have to try to freehand the whole thing. You can click along the path rather than try to freehand it all the way around. And when you click, it kind of locks in that placement, and then you create a straight line. There's other select tools that could do better jobs, but this is the fastest one that you could do to get kind of a clean select of an area. And go around here. So there, Superman's crest is selected, and when I go to paint over top of it, there it goes. And so now we have Superman's chest is popped out. Now it looks like it, it's going to pop to the eye too. Now I could go around and do the mask, and I could do Superboy's crest and Robin's logo and Batman's logo. But you've seen how I've done that. I don't need to show you all of it. Time. We've got time issues here. Okay. So now for the background layer, or for the background, we can change the color of the background. If I go to colors and then colorize will allow me to adjust the hue. This gives you a lot of options for how you want to change the color. You can do something very similar like this in Publisher. This just gives you a little bit more leeway as far as how bright you want the background versus how light, what kind of hue you want. So I kind of like the yellow. Did I answer Nolan's question? I don't see Nolan's question.
He asked, how did you get the tools pinned to the left and right of the image?
The tools pin when we go to single window mode. Okay. If they don't, you have to go into your dockable dialogues, and you have to click, hold, and drag things over. So I have tool options to the left. So what you would do is, if they're not already in your dock, you have to go to dockable dialogues and collect the ones that you need. So I have tool options, and then trying to think. This should come up automatically. If not, trying to think if there was a way that I did it. They should come up automatically after you log in, or after you go to single window mode. This should come up on the right hand side. If not, I'll have to get with him afterward. So colors on the background, you can also just, if you don't want to mess with the colorize and mess stuff up, on the hue, saturation, lightness, you can also go colors and then colorify. This is kind of like a one-click option to I just want it to be green. I don't care what color green it is, it's green. Or I want it just yellow. So if you click yellow and then click OK, it's going to just kind of give you the yellow option. If you don't feel like messing with the toggle settings very much. So we're going to go with that. Now, the one thing Publisher has over GIMP, obviously, and let me bring up Publisher real quick, is I could create this same thing. If I made these background images, and then I could take this into Publisher. So real quick, let me show you how you save this project. Okay, there's two options here. If you click Save or Save As, you're saving the project. The project is an XCF file. That is a file format that is for GIMP. And so if I save this as Batman Superman, or Batman Wins is what I would call it. But so Batman Superman. This is I now saved the project. If I close this out and I bring up the project again, it's going to retain all of these layers, okay? So that because projects might take a while, especially if you're not necessarily very used to like image manipulation. If you're not used to image manipulation, you might take a couple days to kind of like figure this stuff out. When you are ready to export this file, that's the process of creating an actual image from your project. You have to go to export, okay? That's when you create an image from the project. And I have it set to default to PNG file, okay? Because there's layers of transparency here involved. Should default to PNG, but there are a multitude of options, okay? But when I create a PNG file from this, it asks me a lot of options here. I probably would not mess with any of these options, okay? I mess occasionally with compression level, but you don't have to. But when you click export, it might take a little bit of time again, because it's taking a possibly 60 megabyte file and making it into a 2 megabyte image. Okay. Now I have Batman Superman as an image. Okay. So I opened up Batman Superman .png. You notice here that there are no layers. So this is the difference. Okay. This is now an image that I can take and put it into Publisher. Okay. So when I have Publisher open, I go Insert, Pictures, Batman Superman, boom, there it is. Okay. So if you're really comfortable with Publisher, then this is a way to get around that. I also, because of the way I work, I don't print anything from Publisher. I just use Publisher to make images, and then I print the image from either from GIMP or Paint or anything that can print an image. Simply because I have found it that printing an image versus printing from Publisher tends to be a little bit clearer, as the end result looks a little bit clearer on paper. Because sometimes when you print from Publisher, at least I have found, you can actually see like the text boxes and things. You can see like the different color variations just a little bit, and it's really kind of annoying. So I save everything as an image from Publisher or from GIMP, print from GIMP or from Paint. So what that also means is I don't have to worry about margins in Publisher, because the margins I can set just via the printer. So I would create this and make it 11, and then align relative to margin guides. I go align center, align middle. That image is an 8.5 by 11 image, which if you are more familiar with Publisher, this is where you can start using your text boxes to put in information about the program itself. So here I came up with keep calm and de-escalate. Making sure I spell correctly. Or how to stay positive and conflict-free when expressing yourself. then, you know, we all know how to make things bigger and smaller. And, you know, how I explained last week, when it comes to title fonts, I think you can let your mind go wherever you want. When you get down to the nitty gritty of information, the font for the where it's at, what time it is, you know, what day it is, that kind of thing. That you need to have maybe only a set handful of fonts building wise, like building wide, a handful of fonts to choose from. So, you know, your Arial, Times New Roman kind of thing. Just so, you know, you want a handful so you have a little bit of options, but you don't want to go crazy because the last thing you want is this font for literally everything on this flyer because it's not going to work. It's not going to look very good. So I could actually use the actual keep calm font. I think I might have it on here. Keep calm. So that's how you could use Publisher if you want, if you're more comfortable using Publisher. I sometimes, you know, mess around. I sometimes use Publisher. Lately, I've just been using GIMP to do everything, because GIMP can also do text, and I have a lot more options with the text in the long run with that. So the first thing I would do is create another guide. I would do it by percentage, and then do a vertical. So vertical will at 50% will put a guide right down the middle of the document or of the project. And so when I go to type my font here, I'm going to choose. Found a really good font for this earlier this morning, but you'll see all my crazy fonts. And then, you know, when you're working in a project really big, you need to make it like 120 fonts. That's 120 font in this project. As I misspell things. Escalate. Stay positive. I won't type the rest. Then you can obviously, just like the Publisher, you can change the color of the font. But what's nice about this is when it's all said and done, if you say, well, I really want this font to be in white, but maybe the white doesn't, you know, look very good. What we can do, because the text is a layer, as I copy it onto the let me see if I can copy, paste as new layer. There we go. So here I messed up. I put that into the image and not into the project. Well, I copied that into the project. And I need that guide back again. When it comes to when I want to, now I can do things with the font that I might not necessarily be able to do otherwise in Publisher. So what I can do is go to layer. I can auto crop this layer. Because the text is just another layer, it doesn't, as soon as I crop it or change it in any way, it ceases to be text and is now just an image. Okay. So here I've cropped it. It's no longer text. I can manipulate it in any way I want. So first things first, I need to go to layer, and then I'm going to layer to image size. And the reason I do that, what that does is essentially it says, oh, this layer is no longer just in the confines of where this white is. It is now the whole image size. Okay. You can see up here in the clipboard layer, there's checkerboard everywhere. That's because it is now got transparency everywhere. What I want to do is I want to select the white in this layer, which is all of the text. And now I can make an outline. So I could go select border, and I can make a border here of, say, like 3 pixels. And now I have an outline. And when I paint over top of it, I now have an outline. Okay. Your mind can go really wherever you want with this. I showed an image. Let me see if I can find it. Like this is how I made this logo. Okay. What I did was I took a very, very wide, large font. I essentially put images behind it. I outlined the font itself with black. I deleted everything in the middle, and then I had the images pop through the transparency. Okay, that's how I got anime characters to be part of the font. Okay. Now, with this, there's really not much I can do because there's a lot of text here, and there's no way you could discern anything in the middle. So your best option might be to just do a outline if you have a background that is not easy to contrast. The other option you could have, and let me go back, select none, is you can use filters to kind of get the same effect. So instead of doing an outline, you could do something like a drop shadow. And you could do drop shadows by going to filters, light and shadow, and then there's drop shadow. And drop shadow is going to put a automatically generated shadow behind the text. So here I can just leave it 4, 4, 15. You can change the color. So maybe you have a dark background and you want a light, like a white or a blue or something like that kind of offsets the darker background. So here I could go with like a yellow. I don't know how this is going to look. It's all about the experimentation here. Opacity is going to dictate how dark or not how dark, but how full the color is going to be. So I want the color to be a little bit full. So I'm going to go up to like 76. When I click OK, it's going to automatically generate a drop shadow. Okay. I don't really care for that. So I can go repeat drop shadow. Reshow drop shadow, and I could change it to black. And that makes that light maybe even pop out a little bit bigger or a little bit better. So drop shadows work really well, and they are easy to create. You don't have to worry about, it's basically a one-click option. The other things you can do to kind of help maybe spruce up your design a little bit is, so like if I go to the background layer here, the yellow stormish background I've got, is if I go to filters, I could do artistic filters. So you can do things like clothify, or cartoon, or apply canvas, or oilify. What these are going to do is they're going to basically use like an algorithmic way of applying different images and different layers to kind of recreate what it would look like if this image was painted on canvas, or what this would look like if it was a cartoon-like image, or glass tile. What would this look like if you were looking at this through a glass tile? So if I do glass tile, it's going to look really kind of weird. Okay. So there are little things you can use that are like one-click options. They're there to be used. It's not like PowerPoint transitions. You don't have to worry about. I guess it's kind of like PowerPoint transitions in that you don't want to go crazy with it. But when utilized properly, it can be really, really done well. So little things you can do too. You can do blur. So maybe you have an image that if you have a too sharp of a background, that it's not contrasting well or balancing well with the foreground, you can do a Gaussian blur on the background. And what that does is it just makes it look like it's like you're looking through like a little translucent or transparent or translucent, image, or something like that. So The bigger you make that Gaussian blur, the more it's going to blur. So if I go to like 20, it's going to be a lot more blurred than at 5. See? So there we actually have a blur. Now it might actually make the foreground kind of offset. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry about the sound issues. Is there anything? Is it on my end, Courtney?
I'm not having an issue here, so I'm not sure. Okay, it looks like there are some people who aren't having any issues.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. I don't see any questions. So I'll keep. What learning materials did you use? GIMP actually has. If you are, let me see if I can pull up. There we go. If you go to the GIMP webpage, they have some tutorials on their website that are actually really good about just kind of getting you started. You can do like black and white conversion. They kind of show you like how black and white works, and taking a black and white photo and making it color is a little bit different. I found some tutorials online that have really worked. But YouTube, when I first started, YouTube didn't have a whole lot of tutorials because there weren't so many great or easy tools out there for, I think, people to record their screens. But now there are so many options out there from OBS and whatnot that people can record their screens and do tutorials at the same time. There are a lot of really good YouTube videos out there. There are some really bad ones too. The big thing is like, don't think that you're limited by really anything. Anything you want to do with an image, there is a will and a way to do it. You just have to kind of find the right method. For a long time, I did probably the wrong methods of doing things. They probably took a lot longer than some really quick shortcuts that I know now. But that just came over time. I was like, there's got to be a faster way to do this, and just kind of learning how to do it. I could show you a sample anime text how I did all that. The right vocabulary too. If you know what it's called, it's easier to find out how. Really, because we're all librarians, or we're library professionals or paraprofessionals, we all like kind of understand how to like reword things and find synonyms for things. So there's that. We have ways of finding other ways of saying things. This was a tutorial that I found kind of helpful. So I did a project way back. This isn't the exact tutorial I found or that I used to do it, but let me open. It's very creepy now that I look at it, but we had a Mary Todd Lincoln presenter, and one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to do something a little bit different with how to do the essentially the flyer. I wanted the flyer to look a lot different. Sorry, that's like half and half here. But this is a tutorial, and I'll add this to have Courtney send this out to everyone. That says how to take a black and white photo and essentially make it a colorized photo. Because this could be a really helpful thing if you have historical programs. It makes things look different. So here they took a black and white photo, it looks like from the Great Depression, and they colorized it. And so if you colorize things in a certain way, not necessarily colorizing everything, but certain things, makes it really stand out and kind of can kind of spruce up your graphic design in that way. Because one thing I was having trouble with is we were having a lot of historical programs, and well, you could use a lot of black and white photos, which are not necessarily pleasing to the eye. But if you colorize them in a certain way or give it a touch of color, and it's kind of like, a lot of people have seen like Schindler's List that has that effect. When you see color in a black and white image, it kind of takes you back, and it attracts your eye. Not that I'm saying equating the emotional heft of that movie versus a flyer that you might make, but it does attract the eye, and it does make people pay attention to certain elements that they might not have paid attention to otherwise when something is just black and white. So I've seen different things people have done. I've seen people take like a black and white photo of a baby's hand and their hand, and they colorized the baby's hand but left their hand black and white. People taking colorized photos or taking black and white photos and coloring them. And similar to what we did here with Batman and Superman, is taking a colorized photo, making it black and white, and then emphasizing certain colors in the photo itself. Can be a really kind of powerful tool. So what I'll do is I will email Courtney to send an email out to you guys of different YouTube channels, of different YouTube videos, of things that I've watched over the years, as well as different tutorials that were really super helpful to me. Just kind of figuring out different ways of doing things around GIMP. Because GIMP has changed over the years, so some of the things I've learned over the years has changed over time. I'll also add different, so you can add filters to GIMP. One of the filters I've used in the past, let me bring up show you. I showed this last week. So this was 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now. I downloaded a filter that made James Alexander Tom into a drawing. So I didn't have to go in and hand draw him. Not that I guess I wouldn't have done it, but that was not a pre-built-in tool in GIMP. I had to download that filter and that tool to get that effect. So what I'll do is I'll also include some of those links as well. You might have to have administrator access at your library to be able to do it, but that is an option as well. So does anybody, let's see, you said you use GIMP and Photoshop. Do you find that there are any tools or effects? I find myself using GIMP for certain things and Photoshop for other things. Photoshop is really easy to create animated images, so GIFs and that kind of thing with Photoshop. There's a lot more options when it comes to that. I find some things that just be easier to do in GIMP. Like I found myself like doing things in Photoshop. I'm like, well, it takes me 5 minutes to do in Photoshop. I can do in 30 seconds in GIMP just because I have a lot more experience with it. Let's see. I found the book Beginning GIMP from Novice to Professional. That there are books out there, so that might be an option. If you have any, if you have the ability to purchase that at your library, or if you can, have somebody purchase that at your library, that might be an option as well as to find a book. The number of books about GIMP are going to be a lot smaller. The number of books is going to be a smaller number than books about Photoshop, just because Photoshop is so prevalent in professional usage. So, like as always, let me put up my information so people can. I'll bring up that PowerPoint.
And guys, just a reminder, hang on until the end of the presentation so you can get your LEU. I'm going to put that up on the screen in just a second.
All right. So real quick, here is my information. So you can email me or call me as always, and I will try to get back to you. I had a couple of people email me from last week, and I got back to them, I think, either that day or the day after. Because I work the evening shift, so I typically, if I don't get your question If you get your question in the morning, I usually see it in the afternoon. If you, but so I have a lot of programming, so I might get to it the next day. So, well, thank you guys for attending today, and I hope to see some of you next.